What's good, everyone? Welcome to the Manadorks channel. I'm Mike, and I'll be your Cantrip Advisor. On this episode of the Cantrip Advisor, I'll take you through a Simic deck that does what Simic does best. Draw cards, ramp, and make big plays. If you want to view the whole deck list and support our channel, head on over to the manadorksmtg.com to find our Patreon page. Patrons get exclusive perks like deck lists, customized tokens, and early access to content. The commander I've chosen for this deck is Arixmethes Slumbering Isle. In this video, I'll show you how this deck is built, how to play, and how to win. Our commander, Arixmethes, is 2, a green and a blue, for a 12/12 Kraken. It says, Arixmethes enters the battlefield with 5 slumber counters on it. As long as Arixmethes has a slumber counter on it, it is a land and is not a creature. Whenever you cast a spell, you may remove a slumber counter from Arixmethes, and you can tap it for a green and a blue. The main goal with this creature is to use the mana it can create early to cast low drop spells and remove those slumber counters as quickly as possible. But to make sure we can cast Arixmethes on turn 4 or sooner, we have to make sure we can ramp out ahead. Let's take a look at our ramp package. Soul Ring and Arcane Signet are already perfect ramp spells, but they are even more perfect in this deck because they're so cheap to cast. They take counters off of Arixmethes, and they give us more mana for spells. Farseek is 1 and a green for a sorcery that allows us to search for an island. Cultivate and Kodama's Reach are 2 and a green to search for a basic land onto the battlefield tapped and 1 into our hand. Call Me Heart Expedition is 1 and a green for an enchantment with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, put an expedition counter on it. When there are 3 or more counters, you can remove them, sacrifice it, and search for 2 basic lands, put them into play tapped. This low-cost ramp spell will allow us to take a counter off of Arixmethes and pay off later when it gets us ahead on mana. This deck has tons of card draw in it, so Burgeoning fits perfectly in here. For 1 green, it reads, whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. With all the cards we'll have in hand, we will definitely have lands to drop off of Burgeoning. Next up, since I've been talking about it, let's take a look at our card draw package. Green and blue are 2 of the best colors to draw cards in, so we really take advantage of that here. Blue Sun Zenith and Mindspring have X in their mana cost and allow us to draw X cards. Biomantic Mastery is one of my favorite EDH draw spells. For 4 and 3 Simic hybrid mana, this sorcery reads, draw a card for each creature target player controls, then draw a card for each creature another target player controls. With the amount of creatures we can get on our board and being able to choose from our opponents, this card can draw us upwards of 15 cards on each cast. And I especially like to play this card because Nick loves to play tokens. Next up is Seagate Restoration. For 4 and 3 blue, this sorcery says draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. After casting Biomantic Mastery and having 15 cards in our hand, this will bring us up to 30 cards and give us no max hand size. I do feel it's important to note that we also run Spellbook and Reliquary Tower in this deck, which also give us no maximum hand size. One of my favorite draw spells, Return of the Wild Speaker, fits perfectly in this deck. It's 4 and a green for an instant that says choose one. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. This card can pump up our whole team, or draw us 12 cards when Arixmethes becomes a creature. Either option sounds pretty good to me. Tatiova Benthic Druid and AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait are both creatures that draw us a card whenever a land enters under our control. AC also allows us to play an additional land per turn. Garruk, Primal Hunter, is 2 and 3 green for a Planeswalker that comes in with 3 loyalty. His +1 says create a 3/3 beast creature token. His -3, the reason I play this card in this deck, says draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. I don't mind casting this spell, immediately doing the -3 to draw 12 cards off of Arixmethes, and in turn killing the Planeswalker.
5 mana for 12 cards is a deal I'd make any day. Garruk's ultimate ability is a -6 that says create a 6/6 green worm creature token for each land you control. And closing out our card drop package is Toothy, Imaginary Friend. It's 3 and a blue for a 1/1 illusion. It has partner with Peer, but we don't run him in this deck. Toothy gets a +1/+1 counter whenever we draw a card, and when he leaves the battlefield, we draw cards equal to its power. This can get so massive that your opponents don't want to remove it because they don't want you having those cards. After drawing all of these cards, we need somewhere for them to go. Once we've ramped up enough, Omniscience is the perfect card to draw into. For 7 and 3 blue, we get an enchantment that says, you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. This card is already fantastic on its own, but I like to pair it with one specific card that just makes this deck run like a well-oiled machine. Recycle is 4 and 2 green for an enchantment. It says, skip your draw step. Whenever you play a card, draw a card. Your maximum hand size is 2. This card and Omniscience can allow us to basically play out our whole deck for free and inevitably just run out of cards to draw. Just in case we haven't drawn enough cards yet, we also play Teferi's Ageless Insight and Alhamra's Archive. Both of these are permanents that say if you would draw a card, except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. These cards have propelled me so far in games, it's not uncommon to draw over half your deck by turn 7. After drawing all of these cards, we have 2 different ways we can win with this deck. The first strategy is to draw out of our deck, meaning that we draw cards until there are no cards left to draw. Typically, we would lose the game in this scenario, but Laboratory Maniac says if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. And additionally, Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, is a planeswalker that has that as a static ability. Its other abilities are +1, target player mills 2 cards, draw a card, and -8, draw 7 cards, then, if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. These effects are responsible for about 75% of the wins I've gotten with this deck. With all the cards we draw, it's important to make sure that you have one of these effects before it's too late. The other way we can win with this deck is through commander damage. Arixmethes, being a 12/12, only takes 2 hits of this Kraken monster to take down an opponent. With blue, we are able to run a ton of things that make our commander unblockable. Aqueous Form makes enchanted creature unblockable, and you scry 1 when it attacks. Open into Wonder is X and 2 blue for a sorcery that says, X target creatures can't be blocked this turn. Until end of turn, those creatures gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Icy Blast is X and a blue for an instant that says, tap X target creatures. It also has Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. This card shuts down our opponent's boards. With our commander being a 12/12, we can deal a lot of damage in those 2 turns. This next package doesn't really have a name, but is filled with cards that are just really good, especially in this deck. Aminatu's Augury is 6 and 2 blue for a sorcery that says, exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Until end of turn, for each non-land card type, you may cast a spell of that type from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. Since these are cast triggers, this one spell could potentially take all of the slumber counters off of Arixmethes and fill up our board state. Next, Permeating Mass is 1 green for a 1/3 spirit that says, whenever Permeating Mass deals combat damage to a creature, that creature becomes a copy of Permeating Mass. This creature is so great for 2 reasons. It's a low cost to take counters off of Arixmethes, and it acts as a deterrent for our opponents. No one's going to want to swing at us with a big creature that'll get turned into a 1/3. Shardless Agent is 1, a green and a blue for a 2/2 human rogue with Cascade. Cascade is a perfect mechanic in this deck because it fills out our board state and gives us 2 cast triggers to remove slumber counters from our commander. Vidalcan Orrery is an artifact that costs 4 and says you may cast spells as though they had flash. With all the cards we draw, it's such a benefit to be able to draw a card and pass the turn with Vidalcan Orrery on the battlefield. Next, and finally, let's look at our removal package. These are cards that help us control our opponent's boards and power through for the win. First up is Acidic Slime. For 3 and 2 green, it's a 2/2 ooze creature that has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, we may destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Sticking with the ooze theme, Mystic Genesis is 2, a green, and 2 blue for counter target spell. Create an XX green ooze creature token where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Counters are the perfect removal in this deck. It's easy for them to sit in our hands, waiting for the right time to use them. Plasm Capture is an instant with counter target spell. At the beginning of your next pre-combat main phase, add X mana in any combination of colors where X is that spell's converted mana cost. We'll play the classic counter spell and one of my favorite counters, Disallow. It's 1 and 2 blue for a counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Activated and trigger abilities happen all over the place in Commander, and usually it's hard to interact with them, but Disallow solves that issue. And of course, we run Return to Nature and Naturalize to take care of artifacts and enchantments. Finally, let's look at the mana curve and land base of this deck. We have a ton of 2-drop spells. 15 cards out of the 100 are 2 converted mana cost. 27 of our 61 cards in this deck have 3 converted mana cost or less. Our average cost per spell in this deck is 3.34, which is middle to a lower average mana curve for a deck. This works out great when we can draw 25 cards in a turn and can cast half of those spells because they're so cheap. If you want access to this deck list and other additional perks, check out our website, the Manadorks MTG. Also, on there you'll find all of our content and some other deck techs you may have missed. Leave a like and a comment below with which commander you'd like to see featured next. Also hit that subscribe button below so you don't miss anything in the future. Well, that's it for today, so we'll catch you next time here on the Manadorks. If you want to purchase this deck as is, click the link in the description below. That'll take you over to TCGplayer where you can add the deck to your cart, purchase the deck, and it benefits our channel directly. We'd really appreciate the support.